Henry Shi is an Australian academic specialising in entrepreneurship and strategy in family business, known for bridging Western and East Asian perspective. As a scholar with international experience, he has published research on how family firms in China and other non-Western contexts handle succession, and his work on succession beyond weird, which is Western educated, industrialized, rich and democratic, provides insights into cultural differences on succession. And from Confucian values in Chinese families, for example, to migrant family firms in Australia. His global view helps family businesses and helps to understand them and their succession process in a multicultural way. Thank you for being here with us, Henry. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me to this amazing event. And welcome, everyone. So as Jola just introduced, my research is about family business succession, mainly succession happening in non-weird family businesses. So by saying weird, I don't actually mean strange. So these are 5 words: Western, English speaking or educated, well, different versions, industrialized, rich, and democratic. So these are the adjectives we use for the context, the institutional context. If we look at research on family business succession, family business and succession in particular, most studies, most of publications, most of the papers we read are actually from cases in the weird context. So that's good, but on the other hand, we still lack an understanding of, well, our family businesses only exist in the weird contexts. What about the non-weird contexts? So that's why I first got into this area of research on family business succession in the non-weird context. And today I'm trying to share some insights from the cases that I have come across in my own research from Japan, China, and also here in Australia, mainly the migrant family businesses in Australia. I think I have slides.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Yeah. So when we talk about family business succession, when we talk about family businesses, one of the biggest topics of family business research is succession. So what makes a business a family business? If we think about that, it's not just about ownership, it's not just about the management, it's not just about how the shares are allocated, but it's also about passing on. Which is succession. So succession is one of the earliest and one of the biggest topics in family business research. So let's talk about succession. When we talk about succession, we realize that the big question, or one of the big questions we repeatedly ask, is who takes over? Who should take over if there are multiple, let's say, candidates in the next generation? So it's a who question. But let's go to the next slide. Wait a second. Is succession only about who? And is succession only about the family? So a bigger question might be, is succession just a family issue? It is a family issue, but are there any other issues we need to take into consideration? I think both Topi and Carmen, the previous 2 presenters, they both mentioned somehow something about the context, about the environment, which is important, and also especially in Carmen's presentation, she mentioned here in the middle of Europe, we do things in this way, which implied maybe in other parts of the world or even in other parts of Europe, things are being done differently. So next slide, please. So I have 3 cases prepared for today. The first one is from obviously not a European country, or not a typical weird context. It's not a Western country, not English speaking, Japan. But for those who may understand the context, family business context in Japan, when we talk about family businesses, for example, here in Australia, we are speaking of businesses of maybe 50 years, 60 years, or 100 years. That's going to be very old in Australia. But if we go to Japan, you're going to be surprised, amazed by the longevity of most family businesses, especially those legacy-driven family businesses. And this is one of my cases, which is a sake brewery. Sake is the alcohol, traditional Japanese alcohol from rice. So the wine we have is usually from grapes, but here in Japan, sake made from rice. And this company was founded in 1751. Bear with me, 1751 in Japan is still reckoned a young company. So it's not old at all. It's not old at all. It's like young, maybe transitioning to the middle age, like that kind of image. Family name, within this family, the current generation is 15th generation from 1751. It's already the 15th generation. However, one unique feature of this family business is if we really use a lens, we really use a lens defined by the bloodline, the current generation actually has very little to do with the founding generation, because through the last 200 plus years, or 13, 14 times of generational succession, the bloodline has already changed because of this unique Japanese practice called mukuyoshi, which means literally adult adoption in Japan. For those who are not very familiar with the Japanese terminology, this actually means to adopt a capable member of next generation, not from the family, but non-family manager who is observed to be capable, to be competent, and then marry him into the family. So that's a son-in-law. It doesn't stop there. And they change the son-in-law's name into the family name to make him an adopted son. This is hard to understand. This is hard to understand when I first heard about this, because this is very unique, very different from the normal practice or normal, let's say, common sense we have. But believe it or not, this is quite common in the Japanese family business landscape. If not most, at least many of the long-standing family businesses in Japan would have practiced this mukuyoshi, or adult adoption, at least once in their history. One example is, we all know the big Japanese name Toyota. The company does everything, Toyota. And Toyota is a Japanese name. But the actual owner, today's Toyota, is actually not a Toyota. if we use the bloodline to look at this, because of this Mikuyoshi happened in history. So this is fascinating. This tells us that the family name is a stewardship vehicle, not a genetic entitlement. So what is more important here is the business per se, rather than who, the who question we asked earlier. And it gives us some understanding of the succession logic in Japanese companies, Japanese family businesses, where they emphasize more on capability rather than the bloodline per se, and continuity rather than emotional fairness. Yeah, emotional fairness. So this is my family business. Why should someone who is not from the bloodline take over rather than someone from the bloodline? This is what we call emotional fairness. So for the Japanese companies, family businesses, they focus more on the continuity rather than the emotional fairness, and a governance rather than spontaneity. Spontaneity means, well, governance rules rather than spontaneity, rather than spontaneously practicing the business. And also in Japanese culture, they put a lot of value on longevity. So longevity of the family business is a primary success metric for the Japanese family businesses. And this is called in Japanese shinise. Shinise literally means a company that has over 100 years of history. And if we go to the Japanese family business area, there are many shinises. As I said before, a sake brewery, started from 1751, is only a young to middle-aged-ish company in the Japanese terminology. And also, so this gives us some understanding of the companies and also the institutional environment. So why does this happen in Japan? Why don't we see this commonly existing elsewhere? Maybe there's something unique in the Japanese institutional context. So when we go deeper into the institutional context, we understand that social legitimacy of adoption is prevailing in Japan. So adoption, the adult adoption practice in Japan is commonly recognized. It's commonly adopted and recognized. And there is a strong norm around role clarity, or in other words, role congruity. Okay, and also in the Japanese environment, there is a strong belief in clear separation between personal emotion and business duty. So it doesn't matter whether you are from the bloodline. It matters more if you are capable. Well, ideally, you are capable and you are from the bloodline. But what if someone is not capable or less capable, or someone is capable, for someone from the next generation who is capable but has no interest in taking over? So this Mikuyoshi practice, or adult adoption practice in Japan, actually provided an alternative to the bloodline succession practice. Therefore, a takeaway message from this case, in Japan, succession is not about passing something down, but about passing something on, the legacy of the company, to be specific. Next slides, please. So now let's look at the second case I'd like to share, which is from China. So China, Japan, both from East Asia, both influenced heavily by the Confucianist culture, traditions. but modern China has developed a very different approach from the traditional Confucianism practice. When we talk about family business in China, in today's China, we actually refer to the time starting 1978, when China had started their market-oriented economic reforms. Before that, public ownership was dominating, and family business as private ownership was obviously a political taboo. But after the economic reform at the end of the 1970s, family businesses, private sector family businesses started to boom. So this company has, comparing with the Japanese sake brewery, it has a very short history. It started from the 1990s, and it's a manufacturing company. The founder started the company basically from a very humble route with nothing. And in the early years, he used a lot of his personal networks, such as the school, other people who went to the same school, or other like friends, relatives, friends of relatives, relatives of friends, the personal networks, which in Chinese, they call it guanxi, very complex personal networks, and they see this as a network of resources. So the company very much followed this practice or this pattern when it started up to collect, to reach out for resources and running the company throughout the early years. And the business success, especially in the early years, tied very much to personal authority and control. So the founder was the obvious and only source of authority in the company, in the family business. However, starting in the 1990s, the company has entered, it actually has already completed, but when I went to visit them, the succession process was still going on. That was about 6 or 7 years ago. And we could very clearly see the impact of the Chinese one-child policy, because the successor was the only child. There was no sibling choice set at all, and which created no competition. Maybe it's a good thing, but on the other hand, no other options. Maybe it's not that good. So the successor, let's talk about the successor, the only child, who is a boy, which is a good thing because of the primogeniture principle. And because he's the only child, he is highly educated. He was sent overseas to go to schools and then university and postgraduate education. So he had an engineering degree from the UK, and then also an MBA from UBC, Canada. University of British Columbia, which is a good one in Canada. So he is technically capable. He had an engineering degree, and he is capable, also technically capable, managerially capable, because he has the MBA degree from Canada. However, he has developed some kind of emotional distance from the business. He's not very agreeable through my interviews and talks and interactions with him. He has not been very interested in the way his father did business. And also because the father was, as I said, was the only source of authority, was the center of the universe, using his words. He's not interested in taking over, but he also acknowledged that he was obliged to take over. But he has a very different way of socialization from the old generation. So he doesn't really value that much about the personal network approach, which the old generation adopted in the early years throughout the business history. The succession, as I said before, the succession was not competitive at all because there was no other options. There was no other candidates or other competitors. Willing or not, the only child was the successor and took over eventually. But in practice, the founder delayed the succession because for him, as I said, he's the authority, he's the only authority of the company throughout the history. And for him, he felt like stepping back was difficult. For him, it was almost like a social disappearance. And also in the context, in the Chinese institutional or cultural context, external professionalization was not really an option because that creates a loss of faith to the founder and the family rather than support. So this case different from, which is very different from the Japanese case, tells us that in China, succession sometimes fails, not because the child is not capable, but because the system, the institutional system produced one child option and too much emotional weight was placed on that single one relationship. Of course, in the next 10 or 20 years, things might change because of the lift of the one-child policy in China. But how it will evolve, we still have to do more research about it. Now let's go to the next case, which is a migrant family business in Australia. Again, it's a Chinese family, okay? So the second case is a Chinese family business in China. And now we look at the Chinese family business in Australia, the family moved to Australia in the 1980s. And they started their business from very humble beginning. Today, they are doing all sorts of business, retailing, logistics, hospitality. They have some very good restaurants and hotels and a property development as well. So a lot of profit and a lot of employees. It's a big company today. Like the Chinese family business in case 2, we just used the company in China. We also see a very clear founder authority in this Chinese migrant family business in Australia. So the founder again, was the center of the universe. And there was a clear expectation of family obligation. So when I interviewed this founder, he repeatedly emphasized that every single family member should contribute to the family business because it's not just business, it's the family's legacy, it's the family's value, it's the family. And he emphasized that several times, which made me feel like, well, it looks like a migrant family business is even more traditional than the family business in their country of origin. There was a heavy reliance on family labor, obviously. On the succession side, now the company is in its second generation. And the next generation, the successor, the current generation, socialized in Australian institution. Basically, they grew up in Australia. They are Aussies, they are Australians. And they often question the hierarchy and the founder domination, the founder-dominated decision-making, because they adopted the Australian practice. They believe in more Australian business value or practice than the traditional authoritative approach. But the parents, especially the founder, explicitly said this, which I quote here, he expected respect, continuity, and loyalty, and he emphasized not negotiation from the next generation, which was very strong tone. Institutionally, because this company, this family, and this company is in Australia, the migration kind of freezed cultural norms. They brought in the culture of origin, and they value the origin. They put a lot of emphasis on their original culture. They practice the culture quite strictly. But on the other hand, the Australian legal and the market institutions encourage transparency and delegation. And this is one of the points of conflicts between the generations. The current generation, the second generation successor, adopt more the Australian practice, which created disagreement with the founding generation. Family norms put in the opposite direction, which, as I said, we see very clear conflict, not physically, but more emotionally between the generations. The company is now operated by the second generation successor, but we see a lot of difficulty in the current practice because of the reluctance of the founder to let go. As I said, the founder is very, very traditional. So in many migrant family businesses, especially young migrant family businesses, by saying young, I mean maybe first generation, second generation, succession fails not because of too much tradition, but because the tradition is no longer aligned with the surrounding system in the host country. Let's move to the last slide. So when we look at these three cases that I have just shared, we come to this understanding that succession models don't really travel well. We read papers, we read research, and we have been advised of certain patterns or successions. They don't always travel well. They are not always applicable to all sorts of family businesses, especially those from different or non-weird contexts. So what across the three cases, we see what works in Japan fail completely in China because the institutions are quite different, and what works in China in the second case failed more or less in Australia. They are both Chinese, same culture, but presented very differently. And founder readiness matters more than successor readiness. In the second and third cases, second and third, both Chinese family businesses, we see the difficulty was mainly created because of the successor's reluctance to let go. So succession is a challenge to both generations, but maybe it's more so to the older generation than the younger generation. And succession is a process that fits the family, and it has to fit its institutional environment as well. Therefore, to answer the question we had at the beginning, is succession only a family issue? Clearly, it's not just a family issue. We have to take into consideration of the institutional environment, the context, of course, the market as well. Therefore, who replaces me? The who question, maybe it's not the right question, but we need to ask bigger questions like what kind of organization needs to exist after me? If it needs to exist, then what kind of organization needs to be after me, and who and what do I need to let go of to allow that to happen? So from just some insights from my own research of these non-weird family businesses, and I hope that's helpful for today's topic on succession around the world. I think this is the last slide.
Thank you, Henry, so much for those insights and those 3 case studies. Also, the takeaways really insightful. Also, the founder readiness is more important than successor readiness. I'd like to stick to that one, the kind of difficulty to let go from founders. From your scientific perspective, how have you seen families handle this successfully in the succession process? And do you maybe have specific tips for families?
Well, I remember Carmen, the second presenter, said this: speak to each other. So this works. This works for family business. This works for the families. Frequently, we see families talk less, especially when the business is established. They talk less to each other. But succession is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And we also have to acknowledge that conflicts, even if it's not obvious, like visible conflicts, disagreements, let's say, exist commonly. So start talking to each other. Talk about business, and even if the views are different, like in the second case and the third case, they try to talk to each other. I think they should talk to each other even more. But the good thing is they talked to each other. That avoided the disagreement to continue accumulating. At least they could talk to each other. They could kind of understand each other's point of view and try to figure out a strategy to de-escalate the disagreement. Like in the second case, eventually, let's say they successfully completed the succession. There were hiccups, but eventually they made it. And the successor, the current generation, actually reflected on the speak to each other advice. He said at some point during the succession process, he was almost falling off the cliff, meaning he was almost determined to give up. But it was the talks that put him back. So he was eventually agreed to take over the business. Honestly, the founder influence is still there, but at least there is a channel they have established for different views to be shared, to be known to each other. And then because the understanding of differences is the starting point of making strategies to address them. So speak to each other, that's important. And also in the topic, first presenter had a very good recommendation that I actually wrote it down. He said third party involvement is sometimes very helpful, very useful. Third party involvement, and I take it as family advisors, for example. Family advisors, financial advisors who are not family members, but they understand the business side and they have the understanding of the family side as well. So involving them at early stage would create one more channel for the for both generations to align their views, to be aware of differences, and to make strategies to align their views. So third-party involvement, but we have to practice this very cautiously because it also depends on the quality of the capability of the third party that we want to involve.
Yeah.
So that gives rise to which is a different direction, but still very, very important in terms of family business succession. That gives rise to the thinking of family advisor education and training.
Yes, and from my experience also, it's like the way how the families talk to each other, and then you made this recommendation that a third party can help, and I think
Yes.
that's true. A third party can help how to talk to talk good to each other or well to each other, so that it makes sense. I have one last question, and it's so interesting to listen to what you have come up with and the insights from Asia and Australia and the Chinese background in Australia. And this is about the cultural values and the cultural identity, and also the religion that can influence or has a high impact from what I saw also when traveling to China and Japan. How does this culture, the religion directly influence succession planning?
Yeah, very important, very important. From my own research, I can tell that culture and religion is almost the invisible hand behind the family business succession across China, Japan, and the migrant family businesses in Australia from Asia. For example, the funder authority. I know funder authority is everywhere, is almost across the world, everywhere. But the funder authority we see from these Chinese family business and Japanese, particularly Chinese family businesses, are significant, extremely significant. It's like the founder is the emperor. He makes the rules. He makes everything. Every single word out of his mouth is the law. It must not be questioned or challenged. It's very traditional. And this is from the culture. This is from the culture. Confucianism, which puts a lot of emphasis on the male leader of the family. And this is also prevailing in Japan. But the only difference between the Japanese and the Chinese is in the Japanese family business, they put less emphasis on bloodline itself, as we see from the case. But apart from that, primogeniture is still a principle of thumb in Japan. But they changed it slightly by adopting a non-family male to make him a family male. So that's the only, they reformed it.
Yes.
Yeah. So back to your question, Alex, culture, religion, very important, very important. Maybe particularly so among the young migrant family businesses, as I studied in Australia. For those migrant family businesses who have been in operation for like 5-6 generations, maybe it's less important because they have already been assimilated.
Okay.
But for the first generation, second generation, it's still very dominant.
very dominant.
Yeah.
Interesting, very, very interesting, and very different to what we see here in Germany and Europe. Henry, thank you so much from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Henry, for your perspective. That was very thought-provoking. Having our time in mind, we would now move on to our next speakers. Thank you so much, Henry.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.